Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd! And it's time for a review of the new Daughters record, You Won't Get What You Want. This is the new comeback album from Providence, Rhode Island band Daughters, who we haven't heard from as far as studio albums go for like almost a decade. Not since the band's 2010 self-titled record, which at the time was supposed to be their swan song, which was a big change of pace from a lot of the noise and mathcore the band had been dabbling in for the first half of the aughts. Even though I don't find Daughters' first two albums to be incredibly interesting, what was supposed to be their final album over here was easily one of the heaviest and most refreshing noise rock albums to come out in a long time. And not just because of the fat pummeling riffs and percussion, and the tight performances too, but also the bright, shrill, sour, insane guitar tones all over this thing, which to this day still sound crazy. It's like it puts my brain on fire. My brain is on fire. I got fire brain. So considering where we left off with Daughters, I was pretty excited to hear this new album. I was also pretty impressed with teaser tracks like Satan and the Wait, which showed the band going in a darker, subtler direction. It also showed the band stringing their songwriting out to 7 minutes, which for Daughters is kind of crazy. Their debut full-length album is 11 minutes in length. It's an album with numerous songs on it, and it's 11 minutes. This whole new record is an undertaking in length for Daughters. It's approximately 50 minutes, which is almost twice as long as their last album. Given that, the new sonic territory, the more ambitious song structures, I was pretty excited to hear what this album held for the band. And I'm happy to say this album was not only worth the wait, but it's also far better than its predecessor. Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! Holy crap! What is this? I thought this record was going to be dark and abrasive and strange, for sure, without a doubt, but I had no idea what kind of black hole I would be tumbling down on this album. The tortured and demented sounds I would be subject to. The vile displays of auditory abuse. This thing is like all the cacophony of the last record, but with more body, more atmosphere, more versatility, more influences, not just noise rock, but industrial rock and no wave and art punk. It feels like I'm listening to the spastic, explosive brand of rock music that used to permeate the underground in the 2000s thanks to bands like Daughters, but then it got tossed away into a sewer drain, left to ferment and mutate for 8 years, and now it's grown into a 30-story monster come back to destroy everything in its path! The whole thing starts off with the track City Song, which feels like a heavy industrialized take on a Suicide track, or maybe even something Throbbing Gristle would have done back in the day, with these rolling, throbbing, overblown hits of percussion which are super distorted, clipping. That's paired with some warping, rough synth notes, some deadpan poetry, and these three simple elements by themselves create such a creepy atmosphere. Already so early on the record, the band has set an utterly disturbing tone. I love how weird and off-putting and flat the vocals are. It's like they're kind of difficult to read. They feel so soulless and so aloof. I love the way the band builds up the momentum with extra percussion, the additional eerie ringing tones, and then we get a breakdown of near silence before the band explodes back into this final ugly crescendo. It's like this nuclear bomb of cathartic hideousness. The guitar tones at this point in the track are so freakish and deafening and maddening, they make me want to slam my head through a wall. It's like I'm being slowly smothered to death. This track transitions very quickly after the Long Road No Turns, which is an absolutely harrowing song. Features these twangy, nightmare, funhouse, circus organ type guitars skipping over these marching tom drums. Again, just a few seconds in, and it already sounds like one of the most messed up things I've heard in 2018. And the band only goes on to make this song sound even more deranged as it progresses. Especially with lyrics like, "Everybody climbs up high then falls real far. A little is all it takes. A little is all it takes." I don't know what to say when people come apart. The road is long. The road is dark. The track to me just reads like this internal monologue of snapping, becoming unhinged, being on the verge of a mental break. And this song really builds up some mean tension with the driving bass, the crashing drums, the wee guitar freakouts. Also loving the multiple phases of this song too, the direct delivery. It has me on the edge of my seat, but I'm not sitting on it, I'm standing on it, and there's a noose on my neck. The track Satan in the Wait kicks off like one might expect it to given the two previous tracks, with spaced out tom drums and grime-caked bass and these guitars that are just melting in the mix. Then we get lyrics like, "That bastard had a head like matchstick, a face like he'd been sucking concrete through a straw. Some faces not even a mother can love, says the spit and spatter of broken glass from above." It's one of many moments on the album where we get the grim and fevered delivery of a Nick Cave, but also the poetic license of a Tom Waits. Eventually, this track kind of loses its edgy demeanor and actually blossoms into some legitimately beautiful guitar lines that have a nice sparkly sheen to them. At this point, the track becomes super atmospheric, almost like something out of the Twilight Zone. And given the track's mantra of "this world is opening up," it feels like I'm slowly being sucked into something. The song, known as the Flammable Man, is a blistering labyrinth of busy guitars and drums. Outside of a few momentary breathers on this cut, it is absolutely relentless. And even though you could say this is one of the more straightforward cuts of the bunch, maybe not quite as experimental as the other songs on here, the band does work in a really nice and interesting stuttering wall of noise in the last leg. There's not a single song on here where Daughters completely forgoes the sound play. It's always consistent, it's present, it's on point. We are left off again with another haunting mantra on this track: is something burning here or is it me? The Lord song is a horrifying no-wave rager. With whooping twisted guitars, it sounds like something out of a battle song, but from hell. Meanwhile, the glacial walls of dissonance we get at another point in the song sound like something out of the most sickening murder scene in movie history. The song Less Sex is a much needed cool down point on this album. It's almost Trent Reznor-ish with its very deadpan, intimate lead vocals, its synthetic drums, its industrial atmosphere. There's a little bass groove in there, some sinister walls of noise at various points of the cut. Also, the forlorn vocal leads with the structure of the track too. It almost reads like kind of a blues song. Maybe even something some Zeal and Ardor fans would appreciate. Not to mention some Fetus, or maybe a little This Heat. Either way, the really sharp, ringing guitar tones that play throughout many points of this album. On this particular track, they actually gain a very beautiful, dark sense of harmony. Not nearly as off-putting or as horrifying as they sound on many other cuts here. It's actually gorgeous. The song Daughter carries a lot of the mellow energy of the previous track, with a very simple bass groove and a drum beat that sounds almost bossa nova-ish, but darkened up a little bit. Given all the material up to this point on the album, I think the first leg of this track, aside from the swarm of detuned guitar tones, is a little unsuspecting, but then the band breaks loose in the second half into these glorious, glamorous gothic harmonies that are fantastic. It makes me want to wear black for the rest of my life. The song The Reason They Hate Me is maybe the most straightforward rock tune on the entire record, not only in terms of groove, but its verse, chorus, instrumental bridge, refrain on the outro. It is one of the catchiest and most direct moments on the entire album, with its driving bass and the manic rants coming out of the vocals. Also, the guitars on this thing sound like the dissonant shots of strings from the Psycho soundtrack, but on steroids. Especially on the hook, where they literally go deet, 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 deet. It's like I'm being stabbed, but with a sound. Ocean Song offers a change of pace in that it is a story song, hinged upon the dejected shouting of frontman Alexis Marshall. The track lyrically is a surreal description of a man coming home and being overcome by some great terror. He is hit with this desire to run, just run as fast as he can, away from his house, I guess away from his life. The lyricism is fantastic. I would even say literary. His shoes come off his feet and shadow him for several yards. Ghosts of what he was, desperate to keep up until gone. Now the road punching upward into his soft, naked feet. The band hits the listener with yet another 20-story tall wall of sour guitars, which yeah, it's obviously happened a lot of times up until this point on the album, but this is one of the nastiest examples of it so far. It actually reaches kind of a deafening fever pitch, with some really tense drum fills and some acoustic guitar worked in there too. It really does kind of give you the feeling of being chased. This song kind of turned on my fight or flight reflexes. The track eventually coasts out on this meditative repetition of these riffs and drums. It's almost a little Swans-ish. It's a very powerful ending, but believe it or not, the band actually saves the best for last with the song Guesthouse, which at this point for me on this record, I'm feeling crazy because I'm playing a numbers game in my head and I'm thinking everything up until this point has been so watertight. What are the chances this band is just gonna stick the landing here? I don't know what the chances were, but I guess they were in Daughter's favor. Because this ending, what do I even say about this ending? I'm honestly out of words because it's so overpowering. This track is one of the fuggliest things I've ever heard. The relentless guitars on this thing are terrifying, and Marshall's screams of, "Let me in! Let me in!" The fear and agony in his voice on this track is palpable. And then the madness of this song is given this grandiose presentation with what sounds like some really beautiful and rich horns and strings. It's like orchestral size. I think maybe these additions might be synthetic in some way, shape, or form, but either way, they coast out beautifully, especially when the guitars and drums kind of disintegrate to let that orchestral instrumentation just kind of bring this record to a close. It's like the calm after one of the most tumultuous musical storms I've been subjected to this decade. And not just tumultuous, because I've heard a number of very noisy, chaotic albums this year and many years up until this point, but this record is really visceral. Like, you really get into it physically. It's not just this wall of noise that you just stand on the outside of and doesn't really have any kind of emotional baggage to it. This is a physical album, and on top of that, this record is so terrifying. Amazing finish, super consistent, but terrifying sound. What a terrifying album. What a terrifying album. And like a lot of great horror movies, I feel like this album almost comes to the conclusion that we are the monster. The monster comes from within. Because all the horrible and scary things that are said in the lyrics on this record mostly seem to be rooted into this internal darkness that one can't really shake. This record is the horror of losing control and becoming that monster you work every day so hard not to be. And I feel like your ability to deal with that and tolerate such ugly sounds is going to be deeply connected to whether or not this album actually even appeals to you. I'm feeling a strong 9 to a 10 on this thing. Hell yes to this album. Hell yes. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well if you do decide to subscribe. Over here next to my head is another video that you can check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, Daughters, forever.